Assalamu alaikum. I am here for three obvious reasons, and one of those obvious reasons for me is because it's just the right place to be at. I'm black, I'm an immigrant, and I'm a Muslim. In effect, I've learned to build bridges within myself for as long as I've been living. And coming here to Chicago as an immigrant about 20 years ago, I also learned one thing, that there are not many African immigrants and refugees in town, and that in order to fight for community empowerment and help African immigrants access services and opportunity, it was important for me to look around and work with those who were willing to fight for social justice and inclusion. And as the first black and Muslim board president of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, I am particularly honored to be here because Equality Illinois is the first LGBT organization to join our coalition. So I really want to thank Bernard for his visionary leadership and Caroline for the work that they've done with us. It is always important for us to avoid the pitfalls of what I call the single narrative. The single narrative is basically one that says, well, what has immigrant right got to do with LGBT issues? What is, black problems got to do with Latino issues? In fact, why are we worried about genocide in Darfur when we got folks shooting themselves in the south side of the West? The danger of the single narrative makes it very difficult for us to think beyond ourselves, to think beyond what we consider to be our essential problems or issues. And in fact, it lulls us into inaction, into complacency when it comes to injustice towards others. Too often, as one who has lived in many countries before I came to Chicago, I've been part of struggles where people always wonder why I was in the room or why I was fighting to have a seat at the table. And I remember when I started approaching the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights not long ago, maybe 5 years, 6 years ago. And we took an action. And not because we were not in support of the ICR agenda, but because we said that we were immigrant enough to be included, to be part of the larger immigrant rights movement, and to hold this movement accountable if it is going to fight for all immigrants. In other words, if we're going to talk about social justice, it has to be social justice for all. And that we must inevitably live out the dream of building a large tent, large enough for all of us. And that when we come in, we insist on dignity and equality for all. We cannot have a second-class status on a big tent. And so, my beloved brothers and sisters, I want us to understand that in working with faith communities, especially the Muslim community that I'm part of, and I always remind my Middle East and South Asian Muslims that I'm not a convert to Islam. I've been a Muslim for at least 900 years. I can trace to the 11th century when one of my ancestors, Mansa Musa of Mali, went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, and he went with so much gold that the price of gold fell in the world market in Cairo and other places. And that we opened universities in Timbuktu to talk about Islamic jurisprudence at a time when probably part of the Middle East was still not really that level of enlightenment. And I remind them because I want to speak authentically as a Muslim, that there is no way that I, as a black immigrant, can fight for social justice for immigrant communities without seeing myself as part of a larger narrative. A struggle to make this democracy work for all of us. That is not enough for me to simply say I care only about the 12 million documented immigrants here and we should ensure that they become part of our democracy, that they should leave the shadows of fear and be able to have access to opportunity. That I must stand with LGBT communities too, because at the end of the day, we are together. It was James Baldwin, one person I consider to be the foremost American writer, not African-American writer, American writer of the 20th century, who really inspired me a lot, because James Baldwin said something that I always repeat to others. I read this short story, by the way, very short story, most people don't read it, because it was published in the Journal of Black Studies back in 1972 or so. And in that story, he was talking about love. He said, you know, if you're in Chicago and you look at a map, you see Tokyo, it's just a spot on the map. And you keep on living your life like, yeah, I know Tokyo on the map. But when you have someone you love in Tokyo, you get to look at the time in Chicago now, 9 a.m., and you can say, oh, it's 6 p.m. in Tokyo. You get to know the time in Tokyo like you know the time here in Chicago. And that's because you have somebody you love. And that speck of dust or something on the map becomes real. It becomes you as you live out your lives in Chicago or in the Congo, in Trinidad and Tobago, wherever it is. And in fact, what he was saying was that we must constantly reach out to one another. And as he said, the moment we cease to reach out to one another, the light goes out and darkness takes over. Our work as faith communities require us to keep the seed of hate away from the shores of love, and we must constantly ask ourselves the question, why is it that my struggle matters to others? Or why should my struggle matter to others? And sometimes it's difficult, by the way, because again of the pitfalls of the single narrative. It's very simple. You believe in what you consider to be your issues, and you don't go out to talk to anyone. We must always ask ourselves this question: how can we reach out to others? How can we have a conversation? Because in fact, theology is a social construct, it's interpretation. And it's easy for someone to tell me that there was Ibn Khaldun who said something in the 12th century. I say, yeah, that was the 12th century. I am in 2012, and I want to figure out how to work with all people, right? And therefore, we have to constantly go outside of our zone of comfort. Don't be discouraged by the fact that you may not see a masjid on your list here today. But if you actually get out and have coffee with a Muslim and start to talk about issues and ask them a simple question, why should the fight against Islamophobia matter to others? I'm telling you that it will give you 50 reasons in 1 minute. And then change it on them. If it really matters to others, why should LGBT issues matter to Muslim communities? And I say for the same reason, they're going to give me 50 reasons in 60 seconds. That it's the right thing to do. It's a moral thing to do. And in fact, it's an affirmation of human love. And if we believe in love, then we can actually always believe in human dignity and equality. Love is the key. And so, my brothers and sisters, I don't want to talk much today, but I want to show you that in working together and building bridges, we must first start by getting to know ourselves. So let's reach out to one another, as James Baldwin said. Let us ensure that the light never goes out. And together we can make this democracy a far, far more perfect democracy for all. The light, the hilltop, for all of humanity to see. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.